Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. I'm Helen Richardson, President of Sakyadhita Australia, and I'd like to welcome you to another Sakyadhitaoz meditation group. And we're very pleased to welcome Ayya Jitindriya, the Spiritual Director of Santi Monastery, and her topic this afternoon is Finding Peace in the Present. Santi Monastery is located in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, and it's a residence for female monastics. I first ordained in the forest tradition lineage at Amravati Monastery in the UK with Ajahn Sumedho as preceptor. She trained as a nun in this tradition for 17 years from the late 1980s. She then left the monastic life for a while, studying to gain a master's degree in Buddhist psychotherapy practice, but also continuing to teach meditation and Buddhist retreats. She returned to live in Australia, which is her birth country, and in early 2018 re-entered the monastic life at Santi. And just before we begin the meditation, just a couple of questions. You ordained initially when you were really quite young, in your 20s. Can you tell us a little bit about what led to that decision?
Yeah, well, I was actually 25 when I took the robe first time at Amravati, and I guess a whole series of things led to that decision. Winding back to my art school years, I guess, my kind of existential inquiry was becoming, which led my art and exploration, was becoming more spiritual in nature, I think. Through exploring art, little truths started to blossom, which I had absolutely no words for or no way of articulating or talking to anyone about. But somehow I thought it had to do with art. But really looking back, it's the process of observing and awareness, clarifying, and little insights arising through that process of observing. So anyway, my inquiry took on more of a spiritual nature, I guess, and particularly into the, exploring consciousness itself. And as I travelled, I travelled outside of Australia to Asia and Europe when I was 23, just before I turned 23, with a friend, and kind of on a one-way ticket. We didn't know what we'd find, but we were young, so we could work in England halfway, So we travelled through Asia, mostly Southeast Asia, over to England and Europe. And by that time, I was, I'd obviously been looking through a bit of a spiritual lens about what was going on in the rest of the world. Did anyone else have any more truth? But by the time I got to England and stopped traveling around Europe, it was like, okay, I have to learn to meditate. The truth is not out there, it must be in here. That was the sense of it. So even though I'd done some TM meditation at college, I hadn't really. So anyway, that search, then I was working in Birmingham at the time as a house daughter for an older New Zealand couple. And I just looked in the paper, free meditation classes at the local Burmese Vihara. So I just, okay, after that decision, I went along there. And a few months learning meditation with there was a senior Burmese monk and a younger English monk. And then there was time for me to return to London after my work finished there. And I asked, where can I continue to practice, to learn meditation? And the senior Burmese monk was very definite that I should go to Amravati Monastery. And the young English monk was saying, well, there's also this place and that place. And the Burmese monk kept saying, no, I think you should go to Amravati. So that, I just got back to London and called up Amravati and booked myself in on a 10-day retreat, which was happening in a few months' time because I was in their winter retreat. So that first 10-day retreat at Amravati was very very impactful. And it happened through consequence circumstances that I could spend the next 12 months exploring Buddhism in retreat practices. So I kind of moved around the country and did different retreats, but kept coming back to Amaravati and feeling a strong connection there with the Western Sangha. There was a large, growing, quite vibrant Western Sangha with Ajahn Sumedho at its head. I felt a strong connection with the teachings from Ajahn Chah and through these Western monks at the time too. So that's how it went.
And you stayed quite a long time, but jumping forward to the present, you've just finished your annual winter retreat, the Vasa. How was it this year, particularly after the bushfires, when that recognition of impermanence was so close?
Yeah, well, it's been a really interesting year, hasn't it, 2020, for everyone, no doubt.
Well, yes, not to mention COVID.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, you know, everyone forgot about the bushfires once COVID hit, because this was a much bigger, more impactful phenomena, you know, looking at things globally. But yeah, so we evacuated here on New Year's Eve last year. So when the fires, you know, had been brewing around us and travelling from south to north, we obviously been keeping an eye on it for a long time. Yeah, so we evacuated to a small house where there was an Australian Korean nun, Bom Hyun Su Nim, who stays in Sydney. So she had 2 rooms spare, so we could go up there with the cat, and we just watched things on the apps and computer, tuning into RFS radio. Yeah, so 4 days after that, the fires came up through Bundanoon and Wingelow. Oh, but actually the very night that we evacuated was that dreadful New Year's Eve where the fires just roared to the coast in you know, northeastern Victoria and south coast of New South Wales. And watching that all unfold was really stunning, remarkable. Yeah.
You were in Sydney when that was
Sydney. That very night we went to Sydney and we could hear the fireworks happening, Sydney Harbour Bridge, and the next morning we saw this footage coming out of Mallacoota, and Mallacoota took the big headlines, but actually a lot of the south coast villages of New South Wales were incredibly damaged that night too. So yeah, the video footage just kept coming out over the next week or so. Anyway, in the meantime, we were watching the fire get closer and closer to Santi, and the night of the 4th, the fires came up through Bundanoon, and the RFS maps online showed that it had gone through Santi, that it had just pushed through Santi. And we thought, well, that's it, it's gone. I hope Wanda the wallaby got out, you know. And then about 4 hours later, very early the next morning, they'd readjust. We'd had so many people worldwide chanting for us. I didn't ask, but people overseas had tuned in. And yeah, so early the next morning, several hours later, the RFS had adjusted their maps and Santi had not been burnt through. It was like, oh, well, we're back on the map, you know, we're here again. And it didn't go, but it had burned all around the borders on the kind of southeastern side.
And what difference did that make to your meditation, being surrounded by that devastation in your winter meditation retreat?
Well, we were in Smithfield and it was so hot in Western Sydney. Like that was a whole other reality, and obviously the smoke from fires everywhere was impacting Sydney. So it was, you know, it felt like more a national concern that was going on, and Santi was just one little player in that. But I was, you know, I think we were very pragmatic. We said, oh, well, that night that we saw Santi, we did our best to clear around the buildings before we left. And when we thought the fire had gone through, it was like, well, okay, we knew that might happen, you know. So it was quite interesting to see that it was okay, you know. There were lots of people chanting for the fire not to go through, but I had already been resolved that, well, if it goes, it goes. What can you do? But anyway, then it appeared again. It was like, oh, okay. So anyway, that was funny. So the winter, we didn't really have a winter, or that summer retreat. We didn't have any much retreat time. But came back 4 weeks after. It was a bit eerie walking through the forest. We'd had the monks stay here from Wat Buddha Dharma about a week or two before we evacuated, because their Wat had been burnt out. They lost about 20% of the buildings, but not all. And they'd gone back and visited. And I remember one of them saying, it just feels really depressing, you know, when you just, the burnt stuff all around you. So it felt a little bit, not completely depressing, but the impact of just, wow, it's got really hot and it burnt, you know, and I just hope the creatures managed to escape, you know, if they did it in stages. But it started to regenerate so relatively quickly with all the rain. It still looked charred, and it still does in places, but the life has come back. And I realised, well, this bush is just geared for this. It's done this thousands of times in some ways. I mean, these climate fires are certainly much hotter and far more damaging, but the bush, some of it won't come back, but a lot of it is.
Thank you, Ayya, and we'll now hand over to you for the meditation, Finding Peace in the Present, which is a wonderful topic. And just a reminder that there'll be a time for questions after the meditation. You can put them in the chat room anytime, or just put your hand up after the meditation. So now, Ayya, over to you, and thank you.
Okay, thanks, Helen. So I'll lead a guided meditation for about 30 minutes. And given it's online, I'll give a little bit more guidance than usual. And I think I'll open it up for questions fairly early on after that, particularly around meditation, or if anything's coming up for you. If there aren't any questions initially coming, I'll speak a bit more on a Dharma theme, and we might have some questions coming after that. Okay, so making yourselves comfortable. So I'm sure you're all quite experienced meditators. So finding the posture that works for you. It's actually quite important to allow your body to settle into a relatively comfortable posture, and give that a little bit of time at the beginning of the meditation. My approach is bringing mindfulness to the body, really beginning to establish mindfulness of body. And that doesn't mean we have to even close our eyes initially, but just lower our gaze. Becoming aware of the space we're in, the space that this body inhabits. Even externally, the body inhabits a certain space. Now we're usually involved in so much mental processing that the body gets ignored unless we're skilled practitioners. So the meditation is an opportunity to deliberately just turn our attention towards the experience of the body, what it feels like, this body here and now. And as we do that, no doubt there's a whole melee of sensations that appear in consciousness that we call this body. So just beginning to welcome those sensations, however the body is for you right now. We're not asking the body to be a particular way. We're not trying to make it, the experience of it, into something else. We're simply tuning in to how it actually is for us in this moment. Tuning in, lending ear, welcoming the sensate experience into consciousness. And you may like to be a little bit methodical about it and to bring in the whole of the body into consciousness. We can do a gentle scan from the crown of our heads, just scanning attention down through the whole body, taking in the neck, the shoulders, the back, the front of the torso, the arms from the shoulders down to the fingertips, and the lower back, down through the right leg from the hip down to the toes, down through the left leg, the left hip down to the toes. And now letting your attention broaden to take in the whole body, feeling the weight of the body on the chair, the cushion. Feeling the sensations of energy. And quite naturally, as we become aware of the whole body in this way, we feel the breath. We feel the rhythm of the breath moving in and out of the body. So just beginning to notice this. Don't focus down hard on the breath. Just notice the whole rhythm of the breath moving through the body with the inhalation and the exhalation. And as we notice this movement to the breath, we might notice that the breath is not one thing. It's a cascade of sensations moving through the body that indicates this breathing process. We feel the clothes move against our skin on the in and out breath. We feel the contrast of heat and cool with the warm breath being exhaled through the nose and the fresh air being inhaled into the warm body. We notice the inflation of the chest area and the abdomen on the in-breath, and the deflation on the out-breath. And we start to notice whether the breath is a shallow breath or a longer, deeper breath at different times. And we just notice this, just gently paying attention to these experiences, sensations of the body. Not trying to force it to be different in any way. So we're establishing mindfulness of the body just through this gentle observing. And what we notice is, see if you can notice the gentle calming effect. It may be very subtle or it may be more obvious, but just this quality of observing sensations, observing the movement of the breath, and tuning into the rhythm of the in and out breathing. It has a calming effect in and of itself. You just begin to notice that and tune in to that if you can. This feeling tone of calm, as I said, it may be very subtle, but it's worth paying attention to. This is where we begin to move into mindfulness of feeling. This feeling of calm or quietening, no matter how subtle. See if you can allow yourself to enjoy that. Allow yourself to let that feeling spread through the body. There may still be other sounds, other sensations, thoughts moving through. That doesn't matter. We notice and let them go. And simply remembering the breath brings us back. Quite naturally, thoughts may be moving through the mind. See if you can just let them be in the background. If you find your attention has been drawn into a process of thinking, as soon as you're aware of that, just ask yourself, where is the breath? So there's no pushing thoughts away or judging oneself or the contents of the mind. Just simply remembering the breath, or asking, where is the breath? It reappears. And giving yourself permission to relax. To let go of the doing mind. This is a time, just like settling into a warm bath. This is a time you can just relax into this feeling tone of calm. No matter how subtle. Aware of the whole body, we can feel this feeling of calm, even as other thoughts or sounds or sensations come and go. So we plant our awareness, our attention, right here in this embodied experience. We can hone our skill in mindfulness by tuning in to one area where you feel the breath or where you feel that quality of calm. Tuning in, like listening more deeply, and being willing just to observe, to be present, to experience just the way things are in this moment. Watching the rising and passing of these different sensations and feeling tones. But settling into a calm observing. So we find that place where we can contentedly just watch the experience of this body-mind as things manifest and disappear. thoughts don't have to be an enemy in the meditation. If thoughts arise, we notice, and we try to just let it pass through the landscape of the mind, like birds fly through the space. Just let them flit through. That some thoughts grab our attention, perhaps strong memories, or something we need to do in the next little while. And they persist. And sometimes they bring or give rise to emotions, perceptions. These too are not, they don't have to be enemies in the meditation. We just have to know what's happening. We know when thought gives rise to emotion, or memory, or hope, or fear. And just knowing that as it is, in this moment, we notice how the body is affected. We notice how the body and the mind is intricately connected. If something has grabbed our attention and our attention won't let go, then we simply can inquire, can I breathe with this experience just as it is in this moment? Can I breathe with this painful sensation? Can I breathe with this quality of worry in my mind? Can I breathe with this crazy thinking mind? And let that be a real inquiry, a real open question. Breathing with whatever is arising. Breathing with whatever is disappearing. Just letting the body breathe as it will, fully present, fully open, knowing things just as they are in this moment, and letting them go, or letting them be. Just knowing. There's a beautiful small verse of the Buddha's in the Sutta Nipata, which simply says, "See how letting go of the world is peaceful. There is nothing you need to hold on to, and there is nothing you need to push away." No matter how far the mind travels in terms of thought, thinking, imagining, it's actually always here and now. If we can become aware that thinking is thinking, we're immediately returned to this present moment awareness, and thoughts dissolve in that moment. No matter how far we think we've gone, thought is only thought here and now. To keep coming back to that perspective, to that kind of awareness, that kind of knowing, is the place of awakening, the place of the Buddha knowing the Dhamma. Always here and now. So I hope that was a helpful little breather, helpful little 30-minute meditation. Really, you might have noticed, or some of you might have noticed, is really what I said was like a progression through the 4 foundations of mindfulness, tuning into body, into feeling, to mind, and to aspects of Dhamma itself.
So if anyone has any questions, just raise your hands, but I'll kick off, Ayya. And given, you mentioned it briefly, but given, the pandemic and lockdown, what are the potentials for us as far as deepening our practice as you see it during this time?
Oh, the best opportunities ever. No? Yeah, as I was saying earlier, 2020 has been a big one in so many ways. The climate crisis, fires burning in Northwest America, US now, so that's a global concern as well. But the COVID pandemic, wow, I just think these are just such powerful teachers. If some of you want to have a look later on the Santi website, quite a few posts back when the COVID thing first hit, I just wrote a small piece on the teacher at our doorstep, what COVID is teaching us. And we can look at it in the ways that we can see all the ill effects of it. And there's many, but it's really forcing us to, as a whole, humanity, let's say, or society, to have a look at the way we're living. What else could have forced the whole world to stop in such a short period of time, you know. Not all the best science of climate destruction would stop these economies rolling and the governments making the decisions to keep things going in a certain way. But COVID could stop people in their tracks, this incessant moving around the planet, shipping goods and shipping bodies, flying all around the planet at a total disastrous cost to the earth and humanity. Wow, we have the capacity, you know, to sacrifice short-term gain in economies for the greater good. We've proven that. Well, not all countries, I must say, unfortunately, but many countries. So that's just one lesson. But for us personally, we were similarly forced to stop when we went into lockdown. So we had to look at this incessant becoming energy, all of our plans that we couldn't follow on and enact. And for practitioners, you know, we don't mind having time to sit in a room and meditate, you know. So for some of us, it was a blessing in disguise. But for many people, it was very, very difficult to look at the restless energy and the need to go out and do things to distract. So that is a great challenge. And as you all know, you know, mental health crises escalated for many people in that industry. But it's a great reckoning. It's a great reckoning. I don't think the world is going to stop throwing us these surprise things. It seems I feel like we're moving into a period of time where there probably will be more usurping incidents, obviously on the level of climate and all of this. So, you know, obviously impermanence is the big one, you know, the teacher. It's showing us that things, well, it's showing us a lot. It's showing us out the interconnectedness, for better or for worse, on a conditioned level of things. But it's also showing us in our face that things change, and they can change really quickly and really suddenly, and not necessarily in the way that we like. And so how are we with that? You know, what does that do to the mind, to our hearts, or the body even, because sometimes the body goes into reactivity, or the mind's kind of ignorant, you know, thinking, oh, I'm doing all right, but the body's freaking out.
So it's really a time we really should try and make the best of it.
Well, you've got to try and make the best of every time, actually. That's our remit as Dharma practitioners, you know, and I often teach that no matter where we find ourselves, in whatever circumstances or conditions, awakening, the potential for awakening is right there. It is nowhere else. But our minds, our conditioned minds, think, oh, I've got to get out of this situation to get to something better so I can practice better or do this better, and then I'll be able to become enlightened or whatever. But actually the Buddha's teaching is saying actually waking up potential is always here and now, and it's not dependent on conditions and circumstances, actually. And when we wake up to that, we can recognize the habit of the mind to run away from difficulty and to constantly want to make things better, and then we might make progress. But that's a delusion, really, in some sense. The real awakening is right here and now, wherever we find ourselves with whatever circumstance.
Thank you. Any other questions? Jack, did you have a question or a comment? You're muted.
I did have a question. I found it really interesting to hear that your exploration of Dharma sort of began with art. Like, I hadn't really heard that before from anyone. So it's just really curious about that, and also the extent to which, you know, that early phase of your practice, and you went along and you did a retreat and it was very powerful for you. That early phase of your practice was just driven by good old-fashioned suffering.
Oh, yeah. I think suffering drives all of us all the time, even if we're not aware of it, you know, because in some sense, we're seeking to make things better or more pleasant at some level, you know, for the body or this mind. And if we don't often recognize that it's discomfort or a dis-ease or suffering that is driving this mind. But I think you know, who knows where our exploration of Dharma practice starts. You know, there's probably lots of past life affinities and all that. You know, I remember as a kid, you know, I've recalled this memory a couple of times more recently, but maybe when I was about 7 or something, driving in the back of my parents' car, we're going to see my grandmother. And suddenly I was alone in the back of the car and I was looking out the window and I saw this woman walking her dog on the pavement. And this thought arose, why am I here and she's over there? You know, it's like a moment of coming into a full appreciation of duality and embodiment. And it didn't make sense to this young person's mind. You know, so I don't have a lot of other memories around it, but this sense of inquiry into how is this happening if this, you know, awareness is here and there's other awareness over there, you know. And I think also very early on as a youngster, I was a bit taken with this notion of death. I wasn't morbid in any way, but I was exploring what is it? What is death? And then as a youngster, also the suffering of the world hit me, you know, in those early years of television in our lounge rooms, those who are as old as me, you know, streaming all the bad news of the world into our lounge room. So the young minds start to get impacted by what's all this suffering going on? Why can't people live peacefully? You know, but then there's suffering in your own household when people argue, or suffering in friends' household when there's arguing. So, and, you know, pets dying and seeing creatures dying and kids being mean to creatures. And I was always horrified. And so this question of why all this suffering? You know? And my own emotional suffering as you grow into a young person, obviously, trying to make sense of the world, not quite understanding this emotional suffering when things on the outside seem to be all right. So as a young teenager, there was something that came through, which was like, unless I understand what's going on here, I won't be able to find peace. So I guess that set my course for wanting to understand this suffering. And was it everyone going through it, you know? Because my outside life, there was no overt suffering. I had a good family, good education, good upbringing, and I knew that I could do anything I wanted to if I only knew what that was, which was the next question as a young teenager. What's worth doing? I can do the world's my oyster in a way. What's worth doing? And I had an affinity with art, so I just carried on with that into art school after high school. And so I guess that became the medium for my exploration of those kind of questions.
Yeah, very interesting.
Thank you. We have another venerable with us. We have Zhuwei from Nantian. And I'm just curious, Zhuwei, how you're feeling. I know you've just done 2 hours meditation. You gave a class and then you joined our class. So I just wondered, how are you feeling after all that meditation? And any reflection on this Theravadan style of meditation.
Thank you so much, Helen. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I just finished giving a breath meditation exercise with the Buddhist Council of New South Wales, and I borrowed from the Anapanasati Sutta. So actually, it's the same thing.
Oh, really?
But we didn't go very deep because there were many beginners in the crowd. So we only did the beginning where we look at our breath. And mainly I was focused on relaxing the body so that the breath can come more easily on us and we'll be able to notice our wandering mind. But to reassure all practitioners that the wandering mind, the mind drifting away and coming back, it's all part of meditation. I think we had a very beautiful experience together.
Lovely.
And I really love coming into this meditation, Ayya, and hand it over to you so that I can just relax. But what happened was that our cleaner decided to vacuum my office now. So that's over a brief
on Sunday.
Yes, she's so hardworking. It's really good because she thought that Sunday is the time when nobody's in the office.
Okay.
So it's a perfect timing, except it's meditation time for us because nobody else is in the office. But then again, I felt that was so good because that's life. The life is filled with impermanences. Nothing always goes according to plan, just like COVID that was not planned. Disruptions happen. We let that happen. But because I was in, I guess, the best of moods, very gentle, so she felt very comfortable coming in to do her vacuum, and she felt that, everything was fine. So I think that being able to be present to the moment and let things happen, that openness is what is so valuable about this mindfulness practice, so that the external circumstances do not hit us or hurt us.
Yes, I think that's the lesson we're getting, that we can be anywhere and the meditation can work. Ayya, did you want to respond?
Well, just, I guess, to say, like, Jue could have, if she'd resisted, what's that vacuum doing? This is my meditation, where's the source of suffering here? Is it in the vacuum, or is it in the mind that responds in a certain way? So myself, like Jue, I think the openness is so, so important. But many of us as practitioners, we can get caught into this notion that things should be a certain way, and my meditation should be a certain way as well. And therefore, if we miss the mind kind of resisting and controlling, we're missing there the first noble truth, which is, and the second noble truth. There's suffering and its cause right there. But as soon as you wake up to that, it can dissolve. The third noble truth and the fourth noble truth. Yeah. So every opportunity, wonderful.
Sorry, I have this errant pussycat.
Perfect.
Who wants to
perfect.
Look, there's just a small group, so I think we can all join in with our comments. Sharon, did you have any thoughts?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Ayya about, she was talking, with during COVID, everyone's locked down, everyone's suffering, we're sort of, all we've got is our mind. Do you think that there will be, I was thinking of the word explosion, but I'm not sure that it's explosion, of people who are really sort of interested in higher things, not, like the Australian pastime I see is people going to shopping centres and wandering around. So, are they? Do you think there's going to be a shift in what people what people value? Do you think that there will be a greater shift towards spiritualism, or what do you think? With the breakdown, as we can kind of see it, of capitalism, and materialism. So, do you think there's will there be a movement towards a more spiritual life?
I think there will be that, inevitably. There'll be other kind of movements and shifts happening for different kind of people. But I think for many people, being given a lot of time to explore and take a breather and really reassess their lives, where they're headed, and to ask the question, how do I really want to live? And the benefit of the internet, while people were in lockdown, is that they could actually start exploring. And there are so many, as we know, there's a lot on the internet, but there's so many spiritual resources on the internet that people have been able to tune into and to benefit from. And I'm sure that many people who hadn't had time to follow up spiritual things before have found things to kind of help them into the path, so to speak. Yes.
Yes. Well, I sort of feel like perhaps there is, because I guess in Australia, in kind of white Australia, if I can use that, where I live, on the Sunshine Coast, it's very kind of white. There is, I sort of feel that perhaps people might be reassessing their values, like I guess, with in other places in Australia, it's more multicultural, but where I live, it's very white, So I'm sort of wondering if that kind of area, rather than having the huge houses and the big SUVs and all that kind of stuff, hopefully there will be a shift, away from that.
Yes.
And I guess as people have less money, maybe it's a natural shift rather than, they've got to kind of look to something else to sustain them.
Yeah, I think so. And the reassessing of one's values, definitely, or having an opportunity to stop and consider and just be at a slower pace, because many people's lives are driven by a lot of necessity and meeting a lot of things. So they're going at a pace day after day after day, whether they want to or not. And this is actually enforced a slowing down, which I think many people are probably grateful for, the breather, even though other ill effects might be there. And just to have time to consider and reconsider what's important, to have time to spend with their families in ways that they might not have before, and then obviously their own spiritual interests and values, and putting the time into to develop that. And I noticed also there was already a lot of Dharma on the internet, but because of COVID, it's forced many monasteries and teachers to go online as well, who weren't online before. So now we're being able to access many teachers who we might not have had such live access to, just like it's forced many industries to go online and do their stuff. So it's forced a lot more spiritual stuff, live spiritual stuff online, like people doing live pujas and Dharma talks and interactive retreats. So it's great. Benefits and drawbacks to everything there is.
Thanks, Sharon. Heidi, did you want to say anything?
No, yes, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the meditation, and I agree with everything that has been said and taught by Ayya, or confirmed, reinforces actually my own beliefs and my decision to go deeper in my spiritual path on the road. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Heidi.
And Anya, did you want to have a comment, Anya, or a question?
Yeah, thank you. I had a question. So thank you for the meditation. Ayya, that was very good. I really like the way you said that even when we're lost in thoughts, we're actually still there. I find that really helpful, because I find myself often lost in thoughts and it feels like I'm very unpresent. And of course, I'm trying to practice mindfulness to be more present, which is helpful.
Yes.
But I love that sense of, even when I am lost in thoughts, I am still there. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yes. Well, this is where a lot of people can struggle with meditation, because we set up thinking as a kind of enemy. And it can feel like that, because we'd like to be peaceful. We want to be peaceful, but the thoughts won't stop, or even if they don't stop, some of them are just annoying, or the thoughts that we least want come, So there's a lesson right there. It's like, yeah, this is out of control. It's part of the quality of anatta, actually, that none of this stuff is actually within our control. But nevertheless, when we have an attitude that says, that implicitly thinks what's present is wrong and I need to get something else, we've set up this, well, we reinforce the dualism, but we set up this resistance. And so it's just a habitual patterning of all of our minds, But so we need to get the perspective. We need to see that actually in meditation, to establish that sense of openness, so we don't create an enemy of what is. And that openness allows things to come into awareness. And when one feels we meet things that are not wanted, just to be aware of that resistance. And we can come into that awareness through, recognizing, well, this is just thinking. It is just thinking. And it's happening here. And I offered that skillful means of saying to yourself, can I breathe with this? So if you're in the middle of this incessant thinking, can I breathe with this? So first we've recognized there is thinking, which is great, establishing perspective. Can I breathe with it means we're not making an enemy of it. It can stay. I'm just going to breathe with, can I breathe with this? And you discover you can. And as soon as awareness of the breath comes, the thought patterns dissolve. And if you recognize it in that moment, you recognize, that the thinking is just the creation of a whole world patterning in this moment. But just through remembering the breath and remembering this is thinking here and now, it can dissolve. And that experience of release from a thought-constructed reality is very informative. It can give rise to that insight that, so much of our experienced world is thought-constructed. And we exist within a psychologically thought-constructed world much of the time. So this is the territory we can begin to get more insight into and break through. Yeah, is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I have spent a lot of time working with thoughts and doing meditation, but I think just that sense of actually when I'm lost in thoughts, I am still here. For me, that was very helpful to hear that. So thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, thank you.
And also what you said, not to push the thoughts away, which sometimes the teachings seem to be saying, but.
Yeah, well, we tend to look, and to be fair, we get all sorts of different teachings out there, and there's a lot of assumptions in our minds. When we're not yet fully enlightened, we assume that to experience peace, we have to make the mind peaceful. One teacher early in my monastic life said, actually, it's not about making the mind peaceful, or making the world a peaceful place. It's about making peace with the world as it is. And when you adopt, or when you can align with that view, you feel that transformation inwardly. Now, this isn't to say that we don't do anything to help change things for the better in our world and society, but we need this view of we need this perspective of how we can do that without creating duality and resistance in our own minds and hearts, because then it's a constant war, from within, let alone without. So, and also I heard a Dzogchen teaching recently. I think There might be Longchenpa or Padmasambhava just saying that there's no hindrances or these type things. They don't have to be a problem. They're not a problem because you don't make enemies of them.
Yeah.
So we set up our own mind. If we think that thinking's the problem, we're actually setting up our own mind for a battle with incessant thinking, because it won't cease up until we find the right view. As soon as we find that thinking is not a problem, thinking dissolves, ironically. This is bizarre, but it has to be experienced.
And I like your phrase, and I breathe with this.
Yeah, it's
That's a lovely way, rather than saying, "Oh, I need to come back to the present moment."
Come back to the breath.
Yeah.
Because, oh, I've gone away, I have to come back. And then we're in this, we create this mental movement as if I've got to keep that away, go back to this. I've gone so far, I'm thinking of 10 years, and I've been thinking of 10 years from now for 25 minutes of the meditation. I'm a hopeless case. But actually, it's just, can I breathe with this just as it is?
Yes.
And then a transformed world.
So the trick is to breathe with the thoughts?
Well, that's one trick.
Tell us all.
Well, it's finding skillful means, isn't it? Well, when I say breathing with, it's really it's correcting the view that Anya said. We often think we have to get rid of something to have another experience, or to stay with the breath. If I can't stay with the breath, but actually if we breathe with things that happen, and if we do that, you will see that actually your breath, you're with it the whole time. But what's gone is the resistance to whatever may be appearing, and then you also notice how with that resistance, how the body stays in a tense place, and that's part of the condition of kicking up more thinking from this unpleasantness, trying to find some sense of pleasantness or peace. You see, so it's the path is all about experiencing, say, the correcting of the view in meditation to actually see what gives rise to suffering and what actually allows suffering to cease in that moment. And that those experiences transform the heart. So we might understand this all theoretically, but unless we're willing to be in it as it unfolds, the heart doesn't fully transform.
We've still got a few minutes. Robin, I don't want to put you on the spot. Did you want to have a comment or a question?
No. Well, I just really enjoyed that. Thank you very much, Ayya. Yeah, it was really good, very helpful. And also I agree with you about the COVID. Like, I've been doing different Zoom meditations with all different people. It's been quite amazing, really. What I wouldn't actually expect. So I think that a lot of people are exposed to wonderful Dharma now. Perhaps they may not have been before. So it's actually a really good thing. But I very much enjoyed meeting you.
Lovely. Good to meet you as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a wealth of things happening out there. Margaret's joined us. Did you want to say something, Margaret? Oh, not joined us, but in vision. Yeah, if you just unmute yourself, down the bottom left. Yeah.
Perhaps just to say that I really enjoyed the meditation. Thank you. It was very peaceful and calming. And just a few points maybe on this present pandemic. It's more than a coincidence that it's a disease that it's so infectious, it affects others. So, and that it's so global. So I guess perhaps two things from this seem to be developing: the connectiveness, the global interconnectedness in terms of countries and scientists and working together to try to develop vaccine and etc. But also the idea that the self really, it's moving away from the self because it's a disease of the other. And that's very interesting because we have become such a selfish and society, and the other seems to be getting has been getting less important. So it's like as if we're being opened up to this new reality of caring about the self, because if we don't have respect and care for the other, this disease is not going to go away. So fantastic teacher.
Thank you.
I think that's all we have time for, really. Vicky and Yasmin are there, but I think they are wanting to stay quiet. So
I'm sorry, my camera won't work today.
Oh, okay, Vicky. Did you want to say anything?
Well, just very quickly, I thought that meditation was wonderful, and like people have commented, the thinking about can I sit and breathe with this is really good. Something really, I think, very helpful. I just wanted to say also on a technical note, just at the beginning, the comment about to sit and think about the body and where we are is so important. I've noticed recently I sort of plop down on the cushion and I'm off and running and don't take that initial time. And I think it was a great reminder. So thank you very much for that, about how we have to ground ourselves at the beginning.
A gradual entry into mindfulness of the body by just appreciating where we are, the surroundings, the context. Yeah, kind of a gradual settling.
Yes, exactly. It's a great reminder. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
You see me.
No worries.
Thanks, Vicky. And we only have Yasmin. I think she prefers to stay quiet.
Helen, can I just? Helen,
sorry, Sharon.
Can I just mention that the meditation will be available on our YouTube channel, Sakyadhita YouTube channel, in a couple of days.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Thanks, Sharon.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I'll wrap up now and just thank you, Ayya, very much. That was a fantastic session. And I think, as you can see, I think everyone got a lot out of it. And there's a lot to think about. So I'd recommend you perhaps do another meditate to the video from the YouTube channel. So thank you again. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Just a reminder, we'll have another meditation group in a month. And this time our teacher will be from the Tibetan tradition, Venerable Thupten Choki, who's based in Chenrezig. So that's on November the 8th, if you want to put it in your diaries. And in December, we're having a webinar with Joan Halifax. We're very excited about this. She's an internationally renowned Buddhist teacher. She's also an anthropologist, an ecologist, an activist, a hospice caregiver, and an author. And she wants to speak on compassion. It's very close to Christmas. It's December the 19th, but in the morning to suit the time difference. So that's going to be really exciting. A couple of other things. We encourage everyone who joins us for these meditation to give some dana direct to the teacher. And Santi Monastery currently has a patina fundraiser. I'll send you an email about this and where you can donate. And as Sharon said, the videos from these sessions are all now available, or will be. This will be available in a couple of days. So you can find the Sakyadhita Australia YouTube channel on your browser. So thank you again, Ayya. I'll say goodbye now. And I hope you all have a very relaxing and peaceful evening.